Representative Matt Caldwell is a seventh-generation Florida native. He grew up in Lee County, got his degree from Edison College, a Bachelor of Arts from Florida Gulf Coast University. His background and career was in real estate appraisal of business. He was elected to the House in 2010, has served on several important committees during his tenure, including transportation, tax policy, agriculture, natural resources, redistricting, insurance, and local government. And he's the current chairman of the Government Accountability Committee. Matt has, among his many successes in the legislature, every time the business community or the folks that own property in Florida or local governments or people that have an interest in sound permitting policy, land use policy, or water policy, Matt consistently not only listens, understands the issues, but Matt has, from day one he got to the legislature and even more successfully during his entire career, Matt has been at the forefront in the leadership of making sure that good, rational, science-based policy determines the outcome in the legislature. And in a area, as Herschel Vineyard said earlier, when there's a bunch of craziness, a bunch of emotions, and politics seems to dominate everything, having leaders that can take a step back, be dispassionate, be rational, and really think about the consequences of a vote that has a short-term weekend response in your local newspaper, but has a long-term impact on future generations of Floridians. And so with that, AIF has each year tried to recognize some outstanding leader in the area of water policy. We wanted to recognize Chairman Caldwell, who, by the way, is running for statewide office. He's certainly welcome to talk to us about that. But importantly, we wanted to take a moment to recognize him for all the things he's done for Florida, his steadfast commitment to the Florida environment and natural resources through sound water policy. So, Mr. Chairman, it's all yours.
Joel's going to want to take a picture of us here.
Well,
step
well,
over
the question is whether your campaign wants with or without me. I mean, maybe,
we'll claim you,
maybe
John.
both.
We'll claim you.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Love it. So I always say when you get these awards, I think about watching like an old episode of Columbo when they say a blunt instrument. These things definitely qualify as that. It looks like it belongs in one of those. And Brewster, wherever the one is that we got a few weeks ago, can you make sure to get that one to me as well? They had us all for the Champion of Business Awards, and of course I left and realized I had forgotten it. So thank you. We'll just put that right there so I don't forget it. Well, thank you guys very much for the opportunity to come talk to you. I'm going to give you a few thoughts, and then I also save time for questions. I love questions. I prefer questions. I think it gets a better discussion, and we talk about what you want to talk about. I did see these coasters. I want to say koozies. 95,000 miles on the road. I'm forgetting my vocabulary now. But the American Water Works, that's pretty funny. No water, no coffee, no beer, no wine, and no whiskey. That's pretty good. I'm going to take these home with me. I'll agree to that one. My goodness, what an amazing, the last 8 years, the things we've had a chance to tackle and accomplish. And I just got done doing an interview with a reporter for about a half hour talking about algae and water quality and, how does all this fit together? And, luckily I feel like he's one of those, in this case, that's a little more knowledgeable and understanding of kind of the intricacies of these questions. But, it's like I told him, most of the time I end up talking to a TV reporter that moved here from Wisconsin last week, and their assignment editor gave him 6 hours to produce a segment for the nightly news about algae, as though somehow that's going to be an informed position for the public to really understand what the challenges are. We've got two dynamics here at play. First of all, you've got the mistakes we made in the past, and you've got what we're going to do going forward. And you've got to have two different solutions for that. I think we've got a great plan for going forward. When you look at what you have to do today in terms of planning and thoughtfulness before you do whatever you want to do, farm, develop, et cetera, you're not going to leave a significant problem for future generations to clean up. And I think when you look at these elections, you look at the choices that you have before you, I think there is a strong contrast. I'm unabashedly a conservative. Obviously, I'm running on the Republican ticket for Commissioner of Agriculture. And those of you in this room that have followed me for 8 years know I have a political philosophy. But at the same time, I've tried to lay out those decisions and those plans for the future by valuing everybody's opinion. And, you know, every single one of those bills that Tom just talked about either passed unanimously or almost unanimously. Really something I think that's lost in that whole discussion that you get in the political fray during this season. But all those policies, the water bill, the Everglades bills, the conservation spending bills, the way we outline conservation policy moving forward, almost unanimous on every single one of them. And that doesn't happen by accident. We spend a lot of time talking to the stakeholders in every part of the state, rural stakeholders, urban stakeholders, business stakeholders, public interest stakeholders, and trying to make sure that we crafted a policy in each one of those cases that spoke to everyone. Doesn't mean that everybody got exactly what they wanted. Doesn't mean that any of it's perfect. I'd submit there is no such thing as a perfect bill. But certainly I think advanced the cause for what's happening going forward. And then you've got what we did in the past and what we have to do to clean that up and address that. And despite all the harangue and the just absolute shouting match that politics seems to become, particularly when it comes to water quality questions, it's not that complicated. In South Florida, we built a flood control project that without which 3 million people in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties could not live there. They could not live west of I-95. This year, they would be 4 to 5 feet underwater. Their houses would be flooded. And, you know, instead of putting that water there, we put it down the Caloosahatchee River. And that's not an accident. It was by design. It was the decision we made in 1947 to build it that way. And so all the other discussions you hear about specific inputs of nutrient load from any particular part of the system or which participant in the system is doing it, the big issue is that you got to move hundreds of billions of gallons of water or else 3 million people can't live in South Florida. And if we're not going to put it back where it was, and we no longer think it's acceptable, and we don't, to put it down the Caloosahatchee River, and to a lesser extent the St. Lucie, then you got to put it somewhere else. And that's what the projects are designed to do. That's what all of the comprehensive Everglades restoration that you hear talked about, and you hear all these different issues wrap into it, and what the water quality percentage is going to be, and what the volume is going to be. It's simply about putting that flood water in a different place. A place that we would prefer it to go than where it goes now. And if you're going to achieve that, you got to build the projects. And for 20 years, unfortunately, we weren't doing that. We were talking about it. We started it and then stopped it and started it and then stopped it and never really were able to declare victory on any of it. And now, in the last 4 years, we will have funded, we will have constructed, and within the next 10, without a doubt, funded and constructed more projects that are actually going to benefit restoration of the Everglades than the previous half-century combined. And I say that unabashedly. I think that's an objective truth. You look at the progress we've made on projects that have languished since before I was born, some since I was in grade school, never making any progress at all. And we're doing that, and we're breaking through the noise and getting that done. I'm proud of that. And, you know, I'm fearful that there are people that don't understand that and that, you know, we could go back to that, you know, mid-2000s fits and starts again and get off track. And I certainly don't want to see that. I certainly hope I have the opportunity to be an outspoken proponent of continuing to fix the things that need to be fixed and be committed to it. You know, those are the two global issues. When you look at the future besides the policy, again, it's about infrastructure. From my perspective, and you start with the question of water supply. How are you going to, you know, supply water to 30 million people? We're going to be there soon, and you know, we put some great policy here in Central Florida in place as a starting point in that water bill 2 years ago, but that by no means is finished. And I think a very robust role for the state needs to exist in water supply construction, in infrastructure, reservoirs, reuse, desal, whatever makes sense for your major urban areas. Because once your urban area has exceeded its share of the local aquifer, it's pretty straightforward. You got to create more supply, or else you're going to be taking it at the expense of your neighbors. And that is not the future we want to end up with. It's the kind of future that California finds itself in, as an example. I know this audience is familiar with. And if you do that, and if you commit to that, then you will secure the long-term health and supply in the aquifer and your surface water systems, and your rural communities and natural Florida both will have it available for them when they need it and how they need it on the supply side. And even more so, all of that is going to benefit your water quality side of the question. And to me, it all feeds back together. When you look at, from my perspective, obviously my lens is really focused on Commissioner of Agriculture. Ag's still the #2 industry in the state, still the #1 industry in most of our counties, still a critical piece of the economy, and even our largest population counties, Palm Beach, Dade, and Hillsborough, are still 3 of the highest ag value counties today. And their long-term supply is important to that. But when you look at the fact that the commissioner is in charge of amusement parks because of ride safety, and so is responsible for the #1 industry in Florida in tourism. And then you look at inside the tourism pie, #2, as soon as they're done on the roller coasters, they go to our parks and our springs and our lakes and our rivers. And in as much as the Ag Commissioner, 1, oversees the forestry system, and 2, is a member of the cabinet over natural resources, and 3 of the 4 cabinet members really is the person that's going to think about natural resources every day. Who else is going to be responsible for advocating for that piece of the economic pie? So it's not just intrinsically valued, but it's economically valuable. And to me, if you don't have somebody that gets up every day and says, I'm going to go there, and of the this year $86 or $87 billion budget, I'm going to fight for a significant chunk to be reinvested in our long-term supply and our long-term infrastructure. If that's not happening, nobody else is going to do it. If the Ag Commissioner is not doing it, it's not going to happen. There's too many other issues. Healthcare and education dominate the conversation in Tallahassee. You've got to have a commissioner playing that role in the executive branch that pushes forward hard every single day for that to be a priority. So that's kind of a synopsis of my view. I look around this room and I see a lot of people that have heard my speech over the last 6 months, which is not a surprise. We've done 95,000 miles. If you follow the hashtag, well, frankly, you've seen me personally. So I think I'll stick there. I think that hits the high notes of what my vision is, and certainly eager to answer questions you guys might have and go as deep and as complicated as you want to dive into them. This is a smart audience. Come on now. You lose your beer if you don't ask at least one question.
Chairman, I mentioned earlier that not a lot of the statewide candidates have a lot of background in statewide comprehensive long-term planning on water policy. And obviously the political events around Florida are focused on Everglades and red tide. But a lot of the people here are the detailed thinkers at the local level, the state level, about infrastructure in the future. Can you share some suggestions for us about how we educate, a new cabinet and a new governor, new legislators, and share your thoughts about long-term comprehensive water policy?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I don't want to make any presumptions. Who knows if I'm going to get there? I feel like we've got the right strategy, but let's assume I do. I will tell you, relationships I have. Ashley Moody, she grew up in Plant City. I get a lot of credit for that grassroots campaign. We did 90,000 in the primary. She did 84,000 miles in the primary. She was the strawberry queen in Plant City when she was in high school. I keep telling people that, and she doesn't mention it. I don't know if she doesn't want me to tell people or not. But I mentioned that she gets it. I think, particularly when you talk about natural resources and rural issues from that perspective. And obviously, Jimmy Petronas and I worked together for 6 years in the legislature. He had a history of working on regulated industries issues while he was there. I don't think that'll be a challenge. Ron DeSantis, I think this is an area where we got a lot of opportunity to work together and elevate issues. He's shown a very keen interest in water quality. And I like the dialogue he and I have had to date on really making sure that we're committed to the long-term strategy we've laid out. And I'm excited about that. You know, if we end up with a mixed cabinet, we'll have to see. You know, from a personality standpoint, I won't go back through everybody there, but I'll say, you know, again, look back to the work I was able to achieve while I was in the legislature. It was consistently bipartisan. You know, worked very hard to try to hear everybody's views out. I wasn't shy about sharing my thoughts and my principles, but I think we would have an opportunity to work at least on these issues that really aren't partisan. They really are just basic fundamental questions, you know, the role of government for health, safety, and welfare. And I think from that perspective, what I would do, you know, what would everybody do? You know, the legislative process is always the same. I think this running this grassroots campaign was a little bit of benefit. I kind of always prided myself on having a working relationship with my 159 colleagues, all of them. And going around the state like this, I actually got to meet just about every single freshman, potential freshman coming in next year. So I think I'll be good at least the next 2 years in terms of having that personal relationship. But that's, you know, politics is relationships. And that's really what it all comes down to. And you can have the best ideas in the world, but if you have no ability to get them interjected in the conversation, it's useless. And I think that's more than anything when you talk about advancing a goal in a legislative process particularly, you got to look for people that are able to really build on those relationships to move the ball forward. Yes, sir. Well, I think it's critical. I mean, from a legal perspective, obviously we have the basin management action plans in the areas we've identified, the first magnitude springs and then all of the Everglades ecosystem. But it's really a valuable tool, I think, for anywhere in the state. I mean, a key feature is requiring that conversation to happen. In that capacity, DEP is kind of the moderator of it, but supply and quality are both the two key features. And in as much as the two groups you just talked about are probably the largest impact on the supply question, they've got to be at that table and they've got to work together. And it has proven itself to be an effective forum for at least cutting through the noise. I look at it from a political standpoint as an elected official. You get everybody and their brother comes in with the magic ticket. You know, this is my project is a project that's going to solve all the problems that ever existed in the history of the world. And of course, when three people come in and tell you, obviously two of them can't be right. And how do you, you know, I've obviously spent a lot of time on this policy, and even I get a little glassy-eyed when you get that many coming in. For the average legislator whose focus has been on education policy or in the insurance committee or committees like that, how are they going to evaluate it? And that tool, I think, has become invaluable because it helps cut through the noise, identify what the real needs are, and then develop a project list that then you can go as an elected official and try to find the funding to build whatever it is that needs to be built to address whatever our problem is in that one instance. So. Well, that's exactly right. If we were my committee, I'd say, and the question is, sir, you take your finger and you go around the globe. Most of the places at this latitude are a desert. We really are blessed both by our aquifer and the spring system, as well as the, as frustrating and difficult as it is for us on some occasions, that monsoon rain season that brings us plenty of supply every single year. It desals it for us for free. All we have to do is figure out how to use it. Think about it that way. Those clouds are already doing the desal work. We just need to grab it and use it from that point. No, that's your comments are spot on. Any other? Yes, sir. Throw that one at me again. I'm trying to piece that together. I'm not afraid of it, but give it to me again. So the
Based on my research,
yeah.
statute 15303, section 5, the reclaimed water variance application allows for development rights on my property to the point of eminent domain, seeing as an eminent domain contract. In that statute, why as a homeowner would I allow myself to be subjected to such political volatility?
I think I follow your reasoning there, and you wouldn't. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it definitely does that. But I'd love to talk to you more about that afterward. I mean, look, any rational person shouldn't want to give away their property rights without just compensation. And you're. As I followed the logic, I think we're talking about the dynamic at play when you have an existing right to use superficial or aquifer water, and you agree to go to just reuse, and now they've got you by they've got a hold of you. How about that? That has been the dynamic that's bedeviled everybody in terms of it. The way I would frame it is this way. I don't think that's an effective way to achieve the extension of reuse. I think when you look at the dynamic of you've got all these consumptive use permits out there, I think all of us would agree that in at least an abstract way, there's probably more consumptive use permitted than it could actually exist if it was all exerted to its full extent. And so from a market economic side, although we're never going to go to, I certainly wouldn't support us shifting to a scenario where you could literally price the value of water the way you can more directly in the West, you can still impact the dynamic by creating more supply. And that's why I talked about it the way I did at the beginning, about investing in those large-scale infrastructure projects, because if we increase the supply side enough, it collapses the market value of those existing rights, or at least perception of rights, built into the consumptive use permits. When you can feel secure that enough alternative supply has been created, that it's not at risk of being consumed and then metered to you in the future, then you're going to feel much more comfortable about changing the paradigm that you currently have in terms of where you get your water supply from. I think that hit what you were trying to get to, but if we didn't, I'm glad to talk to you a little more afterward. You definitely win for most technical question. Any other questions? All right. Well, listen, thank you guys very much.